Well, welcome everyone. I'm just doing my 15-second countdown to go live. So look, welcome to today's webinar, and it's really great for Site Safe to be partnering with NZIOB to bring you this webinar series. My name is Brett Murray. I'm the Chief Executive of Site Safe, and it's really been heightened to me working on the protocols with industry and talking to industry leaders about the emerging risk, I guess, of mental wellbeing, and that's been heightened through the COVID experience, and as we move in pre-COVID into a pre-COVID environment, that's only going to be heightened further. And I think it's really important that we recognise that as an industry, in fact, across New Zealand, pan-industry, but certainly within construction, because that has a lot of unique challenges, financial, time pressures, supply chain pressures, and a number of other areas that all impact on mental health and well-being. And we also know that mental health and well-being is a real precursor and a risk factor in physical safety as well. So it's really important that we keep ourselves safe. And today we've got two presenters who are going to talk us through that. One is Berhampore Paliti, or B, from Mates in Construction. And it's really great at Site Safe to be able to partner with an organisation like Mates, who are really making waves in this space and created some real positive go forward and enabling us to deal with mental health issues. And secondly, we're going to hear from Paul Lynch. I've got a ton of respect for Paul. He's a business owner. He's been through his own struggles with depression and mental health. And he really exemplifies that small business owner who like many of you may be, who is under pressure, and how we deal with that and the help we seek and to keep ourselves safe is hugely important. So I'm going to kick off today, and I'm going to pass over to B to get us underway, and he's going to talk to us about how we support people through these times of change. So over to you, B.
Kia ora, thanks Brett, and hey, kia ora koutou to everyone that's tuned in. Again, my name's B from Mates in Construction, and we're going to go through a couple of points, a little bit about our organisation, but also some of the things that we're seeing out there, and Brett's touched on it. Obviously, we've had some very difficult times for our brothers and sisters out in the construction industry, and then I'll hand it over to Paul at the end of that. So look, I'm just going to try and bring up my screen and just pray like how that it actually works. And there's a couple of, hopefully you should be able to see the PowerPoint presentation that should be up there. I'm just going to try and enlarge that. And then, so there you go, Mates in Construction, just a little bit about us. We've been here since October 2019, so I've been here for just about 8 months. And the reason why we're here, and I'll just go through some of these slides, what we will do is actually take some questions at the end, but I've got a fair bit to get through, so feel free to fire them through, and we'll try and answer those at the end there. But again, a little bit about Mates. Obviously, we come from Australia. People might have heard of Mates. It's been established in Australia for about 11 years. And the reason why we're here is well, in a wider context. As you can see there, 685 New Zealanders died by suicide. If you look at some of the statistics here that are really concerning, 3 out of every 4 suicides are by men. 45% of those deaths were people that were employed. And suicide's a leading cause of death in younger populations, as well as a very high risk group in terms of our Māori and Pacifica population, which of course, as we know, are actually quite predominant in the construction industry. There's another statistic there from World Health Organization, which estimates every death by suicide, three suicides survivors will suffer permanent full incapacity, and 12 will require time off work. So, you know, we've been here rolling out now in Auckland and also around the country suicide awareness training to now over 3,500 people in our construction industry. And we're trying to get to as many construction sites as we can because we understand some of the rigours, some of the challenges that actually come with being in the industry that we work in. Just very quickly, before we get into the main part of the topic, is how the program works. Excuse me. You'll see our construction worker there. The whole idea is really to try and identify that person that might not be travelling too well, as Brett had alluded to. There's a fair connection between a person's well-being and also the suicide rate. So what we're trying to do is in construction, how do we spot the person that's not travelling too well? And we've done some other webinars around this in regards to spotting some of the signs or what we call mutations. But in terms of the program, once we identify the individual that's there, we understand too there's a whole lot of help organisations that already currently exist in the community. So the key really is how do we get that person to actually access that help. And so one of the things we do is we make sure that everyone hears the message about mates. Excuse me. Which means we go on every site and we try and induct everyone with the mates message, which is, hey, it's okay to be not okay, but it's just not okay to do nothing about it. And so we make everyone generally aware that there's an issue in construction and what it might look like. So everyone gets that message. And then we establish connectors, so it's a voluntary position where people more so in the help category would volunteer to be on site to actually be a connector, someone that people can talk to if they're going through a tough time, and then also connect them to some of these outside services. And that's where we come in as well, so field officers, and there's 6 of us now in the Auckland area to try and service all the sites that are around, excuse me, and we're assist trained, which is applied suicide intervention skills training. So our job as well is to intervene and also to get our brother and sister in the construction site to some of these outside services. So that's that in a nutshell, is basically the kaupapa of mates in construction. One of the things we have noticed, and as Brett has alluded to, is the fact that clearly there's a lot of struggle, there's a lot of issues, and a lot of people were getting laid off in our construction industry as a result of COVID and some of the effects. And we hope that that's actually not going to increase significantly. I think all the indicators tell us that potentially there's going to be some bigger problems. So what we're trying to do is actually provide support to our workers on the ground about how to deal with the job loss, which is an unfortunate event in anyone's book at any time. And so we're giving out some of these tips. So that's what we're going to go through today. Excuse me, taking care of yourself after losing your job. Again, excuse me, I've just come off the flu, but I am going to push forward. Anyway, as you can see, looking after yourself and your family during tough economic times. They're dealing with losing a job. I mean, it's devastating. And these events can take serious toll on people's health and well-being and relationships in their families. They're dealing with adversity, and adapting to change can be difficult, but there's things you can do for yourself. And again, there's no shame in asking for support. Some common reactions to losing your job, and here's some things that will be quite normal if you're going through that experience. There's a whole range of emotional reactions. So one of them is, maybe struggling to sleep or staying asleep, loss of appetite, tiredness and fatigue, mood swings or overreactions to small things, and a whole lot of frustration, right? And as you can see there, withdrawing from others, not socialising as much. But these are some of the common reactions when we're going through this sort of stuff. I went to seek professional help. So here's the key, because sometimes we might need professional help to actually move forward. I think one of the terms we use is just getting stuck. Sometimes you just get stuck in a rut. And so this is probably some of the signs that tells you that you're potentially stuck in that rut. And these severe emotional reactions that you might have that persist beyond the usual period of adjustment, usually two or more weeks. If that's what you're still experiencing, that may be a sign that you probably need to seek some professional help. Inability to function and carry out day-to-day tasks. Using alcohol or other substances to self-medicate and cope with thoughts of self-harm or suicide. So again, losing your job can be a shock at any given time. But if some of these things are actually persisting after a 2-week program, 2-week period, then it's probably a sign that you might need some professional help. And we encourage that you do get that. Again, losing your job during tough economic times, what can you do about it? So here's some tips. The key is get some support. As you know, with mates, it's always about talking, it's always about reaching out. So we advocate for every person that's going through a tough time. Get support, do something. Stay healthy. Again, physical activity and your physical well-being is really key at any time, but especially when you're going through something as traumatic as this. Maintain a routine where all possible. Try and get up at the same time, and Maintaining a routine really means you're sort of keeping things ticking over. You're not sort of lagging into sort of bad habits, and avoid alcohol and drugs. We're talking about bad habits. That's a big one there as well. And of course, there's our 0800 number there, 111 315, and that's a confidential 24/7 helpline. So we do encourage you to use that if at all possible. Dealing with the emotional impact. So there's a couple of things you might want to ask yourself when you're going through this. And one of them is, are there any particular worries or concerns that I can't get out of my mind? And if so, what are they? And how much exercise am I getting is another? And what are my sleep patterns like? And diet. So again, a reminder about our physical well-being. Are there any pre-existing medical conditions that may be aggravated by a period of stress? Am I drinking alcohol or smoking or taking drugs more than before the loss? General health. And another key one is, do I have family members and friends that I can turn to for support, which is really huge. And dealing with that, so here's some tips to help you stay on top of your emotions. Some good tips here. So as well, write down your worries. And so I've been through a period of anxiety and distress, and this is actually a really good tip to write down my worries, identify the specific feelings that you experience. It's really good to actually identify what you're going through and actually write it down. Stay healthy, there it is again. Don't expect to have all the answers. That's when you start getting overwhelmed, is when the answers aren't forthcoming, and sometimes the answers don't come when we want them to. But it's okay to feel unsure about the future. Again, try where all possible to see the positives, and I know it can be a very bleak time, but it's about trying to focus on what you can do and what can be controllable. So get some support, as you can see there. Identify friends and family members who you can talk to. Avoid drugs and alcohol. Be patient with yourself. It's another big one. Is sometimes we can be our own worst enemy, that we can be very self-condemning. So we've got to be patient with ourselves, be gracious with ourselves, because recovery from any significant loss takes time. All right, so draw on your strength. Try to recall a tough time that you've managed to overcome in the past, and think about what worked then and apply that to your current situation. So that's some pretty good tips there to try and deal with the emotional impact. The other key is, and it's not just you, it's your family. So there's a whole lot of worries and anxieties around that. So it's important to take care of yourself so you're better placed. That's one of the keys. We always say that in our trainings. You know, for most of us men, you know, we're the pilots of our planes. So always try and put on the oxygen mask first there to the pilot, so that we can make sure that our family's okay as well. So here's some things, that some tips if you're going through some of this very tough time. Ask yourself the following: have I discussed the situation with my partner and the impact of these changed circumstances, and do I feel confident we can address this? Sometimes it can be difficult to come home and say, look, man, you know, we're going to be in some strife because we don't have an answer. We always like having the answer, but that's one of the questions we do have to ask. Sometimes we can tend to isolate the people that really want to help and support us the most. So that's a question for you to ask. Another one is, have my partner and I explained to our children what happened? If not, how can we approach it so it doesn't cause distress or scare them? And is my family okay? Again, do they need extra emotional support? So what steps can I take to ensure that life remains as routine as possible? It may feel like everything's falling around you, it's crumbling, and that's the feeling, but there are some steps that you can take just to try and get through. Remember, it's a day-by-day sort of progression. I myself have been a person that has been affected by depression, and there's the little things that have helped get me through you know, some severe traumatic times. So again, take little steps, try and keep life as normal as possible. And also, what enjoyable activities can we still do as a family? Because there are still things that we can do. We just got to think about what those things are and try to focus on those. So that's taking care of our family. Whānau, it's the centre of a lot of workers' lives in the construction industry. All right, the importance of whānau allows those who are often stressed or struggling to influence what success is to them. So again, consider letting your extended family and whānau know of your situation, because they might be able to help. Sometimes there's a whole lot of pride, especially as a male. It's like, I don't want to let anyone know that we're not doing well, if this has happened. But we do encourage people, where at all possible, let your extended family know. Because 9 times out of 10, they want to help. and they might be able to refer you. You know, the more people you share it with, the lighter the load. So that's our motto as well. Have fun and spend time with family and friends, and use them as a source to fill your wellbeing buckets. Again, because you know, when you're going through that stress, it can empty your bucket emotionally, and you feel drained and empty. So again, use your family, have fun where all possible, do some fun things and spend time with them. There may be some support within your community, such as your marae or church. Most valuable thing you can give a loved one is your time. So check in with your family, see how they're doing. Remember to look after yourself. That's really, really key. A lot of services based within the community that can provide you holistic support for you and your whānau. Again, all these resources in this PowerPoint that I'm going through can be found on our website. It's at www.mates.net.nz. Feel free to jump on that, click on the resources tab, and you'll see this PowerPoint and many other resources that you can actually tap into if you're going through this yourself. Or maybe you know of a person that is going through that in your company. Again, this whānau order has partners who are located nationally, so that's one of the many organisations that are actually out there and can help. Dealing with the financial impact. So this is a big one here. Again, some pretty key questions there. Do I have a clear understanding of how this change will affect my circumstances? Have I made a list of expenses and income? Sometimes we can be paralysed, and we don't want to get into the nitty-gritty, but we do encourage you. Do ask these questions. Have I thought realistically about the areas where household budget cuts can be made? So there are always things that we can do. Life might not carry on as before, but still it is possible to continue on and navigate your way through some of the financial difficulties. Have I thought about my family and have I thought of my family and I will manage financially until I find another job. So it's about how you're going to manage that. Do I think I can do this on my own, or do I need professional financial advice? And do I have the option of seeking short-term assistance from family and friends if you need to? So again, it really is geared towards getting the help that you need, whatever that looks like. And the same principle we've always used at Mates is, you know, do something, and the help is there. Right, so what you can do in regards to those, you can draw up a budget, right? The budget is always helpful to be able to see the incomings and outgoings. Contact your bank if you've got in order to have some control over your financial situation. Contact your bank and see what they can do in regards to some of the financial issues or pushes that you might be under. So if you can renegotiate or move things around. And of course, there is assistance from the Ministry of Social Development. MSD provides short-term counselling support and information to help you through a difficult time. And there's the number there, which is 0800 559 009. Right? Again, making the most of any work entitlements is another key thing that you can do. Information about your entitlements. The first step is, after losing your job, is to find out about your entitlements and see what is the best way for you to deal with any money that you may receive, any payment from your entitlements. If you lost your job because the company's closed and your employer cannot meet your outstanding entitlements due to liquidation or bankruptcy, you may be entitled to payments through Employment New Zealand. And so there's the Employment New Zealand website there, as well as the 0800 number. And again, these are easily accessible on our website. Financial information for deployed workers, it's MB, contact number is here, 0800. And again, excuse me, the whole idea is make a plan. So that's the key. Whatever that plan is, do something to move forward. Some extra ones there is consider how to use any redundancy payments. We might have some redundancy, so again, carefully consider how you're going to spread these out. Accessing your KiwiSaver early. There is a hardship grant that is available for you to be able to access your KiwiSaver. So talk to your KiwiSaver provider and work your way through the options there. And of course, WINS payments, there's our 100 number there that is available. Okay. And again, feel free to post up any questions you might have as well, and I'll try and answer these in probably about 5 minutes when we get to the end. I'm happy to take any questions before we end it over to Paul. So here's the other one, who can provide assistance, right? So you've got some really key organisations that we partner with there. Mental Health Foundation is there. Help for mental health conditions under the Ministry of Social Development, says Work and Income is there. Job search, again under Work and Income. And finding work after redundancy, so you've got careers. Another one here is hello@tekemai.co.nz. So it's a work support program that provides wraparound support for people returning to work from the unemployment benefit. So it's another contact there that we sometimes use. Right, and you've got your big ones there, obviously Department of Work and Income, so we've covered that, Employment New Zealand, and the Employment Relations Authority as well. If you feel you've been unfairly dismissed from your employment, then you're able to make an application, and these must be lodged within 21 days of your dismissal. Right. So again, here's some organisations in regards to looking after mental health. Obviously, there's us, Mates in Construction, with our 0800 number. It's 24/7 helpline, National Helpline 1737. Lifeline is there as well, 0800 543 345, and Tautoko Support Helpline, as well as Man Alive. So there's some numbers there that you can access in regards to looking after your mental health. And some more in regards to financial advice and help with managing debts. moneytalks.co.nz. FinCap is a good one, as well as Sorted. So what we're trying to do is give you as many options as we can, because the help is there. It's just a matter of trying to sift through and find out where it is. So we do encourage you to avail yourselves of some of these. And one of the things that we do also offer support is because it's not just the person that obviously is losing their job, but it can be very difficult for employers to go through that as well. It can affect you quite significantly. So here's some very quick tips before we finish around this. If you must let someone go, I mean, our motto has always been very clear from the beginning: be clear, honest, and direct. Here's some examples. I'm sorry, we are meeting today because we need to disestablish a role. Express gratitude for their work. Provide a simple explanation about the economic conditions that led to the layoff, and be clear. Now, this is not about the employee's specific job performance. It's not your fault. It's about the global circumstance that none of us created. So again, these can be very tricky conversations to have, but that's some of the tips that we feel is a good framework just to stick around. Be clear, be honest, and direct. That way the message is clear. The other thing is support, but keep it real. Okay, so be available and willing to provide support or counsel. And I know many employers will do this. Provide opportunities for ask questions now or in the future. Offer ideas about job opportunities at other organisations if that's possible. Offer to service as a reference, and don't overcommit to things you can't deliver, such as your job might still be here if things get better. Only if that's the case, but again, sometimes we tend to say things just to try and cushion the blow, but if that's not the truth, then best not to say it. So again, don't sugarcoat it, and don't give false hope. So some tips there. The other one is be transparent. Survivors are going to be worried about their jobs. We know that. No one knows where this is going to go. Be as transparent as possible. Have an Ask Me Anything platform to provide a platform to extinguish any myths or rumours about the situation, and have an explanation as to why the layoffs are necessary. So again, there's a little example there. The company's facing a challenge. Let me share what we did, why we did it, and how we can move forward. So that's cool in terms of doing that. And the other thing is that you need support as well. And not an easy time for anyone involved, but as managers during this time, our routines have been disrupted. It's critical that you have a place where you can talk, release tension, and where you can deal with your worries. I mean, for some, you're not letting go of strangers, you're letting go of workmates and people, colleagues. So you need some support as well. Find someone else you can talk to, a friend or a mentor or a colleague at a different organisation. Be selective and cautious about how you display your stress and emotion when with your team. Again, that's just a little tip when you need to break the news, and if you do. So I think we've come to the end. And again, I'm quite happy to take any questions there. I'm just looking at the chat there and see if anyone does have any questions that they might want to flick through. Again, yeah, very, very difficult time. You know, before I hand it over to Paul, it really is about looking after each other. That's what Mates has been about since the inception in October last year. We were down there at Fletcher's when they had that announcement there of 1,000 job losses, and it was a very devastating time. So again, we hope, and we don't say that obviously that if there's going to be an economic downturn, that there's going to be more job losses, but the reality is it potentially could be. So, you know, take these tools and again, jump on our website, feel free to jump on there, www.mates.net.nz. And you can access this PowerPoint as well as any of these resources and some of the contact numbers that you might want to have, or just give us a call on the 0800 number 111 315 about anything that you might want to ask questions about or discuss as part of this webinar, or even the greater mate services that we offer. Apart from that, I see that there's no questions that have come through, which is great. And again, feel free to ring us or contact us at one of those platforms. I'm just going to stop sharing, and I'm going to introduce my very good friend Paul Lynch, and he's going to come on and share his story and his testimony. So, Paul, I'll hand it over to you, and thanks everyone for tuning in. Awesome.
Yes, Pete. I hope everyone can hear me. Some good information there, so I hope everyone took note of where to go to find that. Just a little bit about me. I'm not from any organisation as such. I'm just an individual. My name is Paul Lynch, and my wife Wendy and I own a small flooring business here in Christchurch. We supply and install carpet and vinyl in the Kainga properties, Housing New Zealand properties here in Canterbury, as well as ourselves. We only employ 2 tradesmen, so very small business in the big scheme of things. Just to be clear from the outset, I am a tradie. I'm not an expert about any of the things I'm going to talk about. I've got no clinical background, not a counsellor, not a therapist, certainly not a psychologist, and I won't be telling anyone how to think or how to feel. I'm just going to share a little bit about myself and my own journey, the things that happened to me that led me to get involved in this, what I think is very important work. It's okay to talk about this stuff. I'd like to go a step further than that. It's more than okay, it's actually essential. It is essential that we talk about this stuff. Now, there is a chance that more than a couple of you might recognise yourself in some of what I'm going to say. If that happens, I would encourage you to speak to somebody that you trust, or make use of the Mates in Construction, or go to the 1737 phone or text number to speak to a trained professional. It's important that if what I'd say does bring anything up for you, that you talk to someone about it. When we talk about health and safety in any workplace, the conversation usually involves things like you must comply with these rules, you must comply with this legislation. There's I's to dot, T's to cross. We basically have to do all sorts of different things to prove that we comply with the legislation. It's actually a law. We have to do those things. And then if something happens, something goes wrong and we have an accident, we then have to prove that we had all of those things in place. We have to produce the documentation to say that we had all those things implemented that were supposed to prevent the accident from happening, but it happened anyway. And then we have to prove that we're actually doing everything we can to prevent that accident from happening again. All of those rules are designed to keep us healthy and safe in a physical sense. I think we have to train and educate our workforce how to fill in the paperwork and do all of those things. And then, if an accident does occur, then it gets even more difficult. We constantly hear all that scary stuff, the things about, if you don't comply and something happens, something goes wrong, you have an accident and you're deemed to be liable. Could be faced with some pretty hefty fines. You might even go to jail. None of us want to go to jail. So all of those things cost us time, they cost us money. And it's probably fair to say that they've sort of become second nature, which may mean that a little bit of complacency might be creeping in. But the key word everywhere is we must comply. Accidents happen, we know that. We've had it drummed into us for so long. We know that accidents are going to happen, but we're not here to talk about any of that. Today I'm going to just share a little bit about my own journey with mental health. To me, it's about looking after the most important piece of kit that any of us can have, which is the high-tech apparatus that sits on our shoulders. It's fair to say that if that is not operating properly, none of this other stuff really matters a hell of a lot. A report commissioned by Site Safe who invited me to participate in this webinar. 2019 revealed that statistically, if you work in the construction or trade sector, you are 6 times more likely to die by suicide than you are in a workplace accident. I don't know about anyone else, but that's a pretty bitter taste in my mouth. We've got to do better. I'm going to get a little personal now. What started me on this journey of what I like to call self-discovery, the 1st of September 2013, my younger brother Brett made the decision to end his own life. He was 47 years old, a skilled, respected commercial roofer in Wellington, and when Wendy and I walked into his garage in Paraparaumu on the Kapiti coast that morning, we didn't know it then, but our lives were about to change forever. Until that day, suicide was something that happened to other people, not to me. It's other people. That shit happens to other people, not to me. Now, Brett, my brother, was never diagnosed with any mental illness, and to suggest that he had a mental illness is speculation. But with the benefit of hindsight, I do think that over the entire course of his adult life, he struggled with what I would call depressive episodes. I think it's probably fair to say that pretty much all of us go through depressive episodes at some point in our life. One guy who I admire immensely likes to put it like this: over the course of our lives, we will all have periods of both good and bad mental health. It's very much like our physical health. We all get sick sometimes. Sometimes we struggle with our thoughts and our emotions. As kids, my brothers and I were brought up on the Kapiti coast in the late 1960s and early 70s. Typical Kiwi environment: rugby, beer, more rugby. As boys, we had no sisters. It was just us 3 boys brought up in that era where boys didn't show emotion, brought up to be tough, durable, resilient. Just pick yourself up and get on with it. You're not allowed to show any pain because that's going to be seen as being weak. Wasn't an ideal way to be brought up, but there's no disrespect to the way my parents were parenting us, because that was the only way they knew to do it back then. When Brett was in the 3rd form, which I think is year 9 in today's language, one of his friends took his own life. Back then, this was 1979 or thereabouts. Nobody talked about it, not ever. Nobody was offered any support. It was the way of dealing with it back then was literally to cover it up, to shut up, to pretend it didn't exist. If you don't talk about it, there's no problem. That was the closest that suicide ever got to me until some 35 years later, when Brett decided that he was going to end his own life. It was always someone else's problem, never mine. I won't go too deep into all the details of Brett's life, but to say that at the time that he ended his own life, he was in what I would call a toxic marriage of about 10 years. I can't, for obvious reasons, go too deeply into that, but it was very unhealthy, very toxic. Brett had a long-standing unhealthy relationship with alcohol, and had more recently discovered a real liking for methamphetamine, which had become more than recreational. Fair to say he was not only an alcoholic, he was also a drug addict. Now, his suicide took me on quite a journey personally, a journey where I eventually got to know myself better than I had ever known myself before. Initially, I went down the path of self-destruction. I literally just didn't care about anything. I wanted answers, and there weren't any. For quite a few months after Brett died, I spent my days going to work and functioning, doing what needed to be done, going home at night and standing in the shower, crying until the water ran cold. I was angry at everyone and everything, functioning during the week, and drinking at the weekends and getting blackout drunk. Only to be told, usually on a Sunday afternoon, once I'd sort of sobered up a bit, being told about all of the horrible things that I'd said or done to other people, and I had no recollection of them. And at the time, and this is quite important, at the time I was unable to see that everybody around me was also struggling with their own grief and their own demons, shall we say. And to be honest, I didn't care. I was so caught up in my own bullshit that I did not care what was going on around me. And I include my wonderful wife, Wendy, in that. I couldn't see that everybody else was also struggling, and I didn't care. I was so caught up in my own stuff. That's quite important to recognise that, because when we're swirling inside our own heads, we're unable to see the effects that our behaviour or our actions might be having on those that are closest to us. It sort of becomes all-consuming, and it's not healthy. I've always been a bit of a writer, love to write stuff down. I've always, dabbled in writing. Sounds a bit, but the typical Kiwi male doesn't write poems. Well, I've been doing it pretty much my whole life. I love to write, and I started writing down what I was thinking, what I was feeling, probably early 2014, about 6 or 7 months after Brett died. Just writing about what I was thinking and what was going through my mind, and it started to sort of, I was talking to Wendy about it, and we decided that it was sort of might be beneficial for other people to read it. But of course what I was writing was not fit for the consumption of other people, basically. So I had to figure out how to edit it all down and make some sense of it, so that I wanted it to be readable by somebody that wouldn't normally read. So we decided to put it all together and self-publish a book, which we did. Initially it was called Suicide Aftermath. In December 2015, I took delivery of about 500 copies of the completed book. It was very raw, very angry, and to be fair, it was probably never going to be very well received. And it was almost a blessing that a campaign was started on social media, a bit of a hate campaign against me and the contents of the book, which led me to basically shelve the whole plan. I took down all my social media pages and basically gave up on the idea. I had a Facebook page that initially was called Suicide Aftermath, which had close to 3,000 followers on it at the time that this all kicked off. And I was forced to close it down because Facebook, in their wisdom, wanted me to call the page Suicide Aftermath Controversial Humour. And I couldn't have that. There's nothing humorous about suicide. So I just canned the whole page, canned the idea, and put it on the shelf. Thought I would never think about it again. Following 18 months or so, Wendy and I connected with a lot of people up and down New Zealand. We got involved in a lot of different things, a lot of different organisations and things. We contributed a lot of time and a lot of money to a lot of different things. And eventually I started to think about the idea of this book again, because I'd learnt so much. I'd become a sponge for information. I was so interested in everything to do with mental health, addiction, and in particular suicide, and all of the things that lead people to suicide. Because when we get down to it, the convenient scapegoat of mental health or depression is not the only driver that leads people to suicide. And I got really interested in that, and I just wanted to know everything I could possibly know about what takes people down that road. So I picked up the book again and decided to basically rewrite it. I had it professionally edited. It still had to be self-published, which of course meant a lot more money had to be thrown into it. We were prepared to do that. So we did that, had it edited professionally, got it all printed, and took delivery 1st of September 2017. Took delivery of the initial shipment. We were very fortunate that we had some good advice and good people got on board with it, and we managed to get that into bookshops all over New Zealand. We got copies into pretty much every library in New Zealand. Copies of the book went overseas to Australia and to the UK, and we even managed to get it into a couple of New Zealand prisons. It was well received and it went really well. I still have copies of that available. That's behind me there on the wall. That's a print of the cover of the book. If anyone wants a copy of it, I can certainly get that to you. Just contact me afterwards. Wendy and I contribute. We continue to contribute to many different things. We're involved with a lot of different organisations and charities. We do a lot of stuff under the radar. I don't think it needs to be all pomp and ceremony. A lot of things can be done under the radar very quietly and very effectively. I'm just going to get into some quite personal stuff now for me about what happened to me after my brother's suicide. Effectively what it did, it exposed for me a whole lot of stuff that I'd been suppressing my entire life because I did not know it existed. I'd always been taught that showing any sort of emotion or weakness, basically a man wasn't allowed. You weren't allowed to do that. You couldn't show that you were actually vulnerable. It just wasn't permitted. So when this traumatic event occurred, and I'm not going to pretend that I don't still struggle with some of the images that I have in my head, when that happened, a whole lot of stuff exploded to the surface, and I just couldn't suppress it any longer. I was experiencing what I thought, was a respiratory illness. Because being an apprentice in the 1980s, I know that I've been exposed to asbestos. A lot of the old flooring that we just used to go in and sand off the floor was full of asbestos. No dust masks or anything like that back then. So I started to get a little concerned that I'd developed this respiratory ailment. I was having these constant bouts of being unable to breathe. I just felt like the air didn't have enough oxygen in it. And eventually, after a pretty bad attack of this, Wendy, of course, because, Kiwi male, I wasn't going to the doctor, but Wendy made the appointment and insisted that I go. And I ended up reluctantly sitting there and listening to the doctor after we'd gone through all of these tests, lung functions and things, looking me square in the face and saying, what you're dealing with is anxiety and associated panic attacks. I'm not going to use the language that I used, but I pretty much said, no, that's not me, man. I don't have that. I don't have anxiety. Panic attacks? Nah, that's not me. Can't be me. But anyway, the doctor gave me a whole lot of information. I went away, started researching this anxiety thing. Lo and behold, every single thing that I read and looked at was as if I'd written it myself, about myself. Bit of an eye-opener and sort of set me on a path of, like, obviously wanting to learn more about this thing, which took me on a backwards journey through my life. And I discovered that, over the years, pretty much my entire life, even as a kid, I could remember instances of pretty severe social anxiety, which I just put down to being shy or awkward in social situations. I remember my parents referring to me as, he's the shy one, he doesn't say much, he just watches, he's very shy. But the truth is, even back then as a kid and even as an adult, I was actually shit scared of literally everything. I could not function in a social situation until, as a teenager and then as an adult, I discovered alcohol. Alcohol was an amazing lubricant that allowed me to fit into social situations. But the problem for me and alcohol was that I didn't have an off switch. I used it to allow me to fit into social situations, but I quickly discovered that it was a flawed plan. Because without that off switch, it went beyond being a social thing and went into something very, very different, something very dark. Anyway, I'll just speed up a little bit because I'm conscious of the time. I continued with my binge drinking for quite a long time, hiding my emotions in a haze of alcohol until one night after just another alcohol-fueled, violent, angry outburst, I'd attacked a solid wooden door in the garage of our home, and Wendy, my wife, basically said to me, if you don't sort your issues with this drinking and your anger out, then we may not have a future. That was a bit like an uppercut delivered verbally, but it didn't knock me out, it woke me up. Long story short, I wasn't quite finished with alcohol yet. 2016, December the 13th, I remember the morning very, very clearly. I woke up in a Palmerston North hotel room. I was covered in blood. My face was stuck to the pillow with injuries that I could not remember getting. I made a conscious decision that morning to quit drinking. I told Wendy about it. She supported me for the first year, and I haven't had a drink since that day. And believe me, I am much, much healthier. I see the world a lot more clearly, and I've learned a whole lot of new coping mechanisms to deal with social situations. I never considered that I was an alcoholic. I have since learned that there's varying levels of alcoholism. For me, I don't think I was addicted to it, but I think in terms of like needing it to fit in socially, I was dependent on it. So maybe not addicted, but definitely dependent, if there's a difference. By and large, that Kiwi hard-ass mentality is still alive and well in New Zealand. Us Kiwi males, we're not good at talking about things. We need to get a lot better. I don't mean, I'm not talking about, a bunch of tough guys standing around a bar and drinking beer and talking about all their feelings and their emotions. I'm not sure that Kiwi men really want to do that. I'm not sure that's ever going to work. But I am talking about the little conversations, everyday conversations that can help to lighten the load and just clear the head out a little bit so that there's a little bit more room for the inevitable crap that is going to come our way. Let's be honest, in the construction sector, construction and trades, there's always more crap that's coming our way, and it's important that we have an outlet. The only way to release what's inside our head is pretty much to verbalise it. I draw the comparison between a physical illness. If you've got a crooked stomach, whatever's making you crook usually comes out one end or the other. If it's something that's inside our head that's making us a little bit ill or not quite right, the only way to get it out is to verbalise it. So it's very important that we talk to someone we trust just to get rid of whatever's troubling us. I'm just going to cut to, I've got a whole lot more here. My whole presentation is probably sort of 40 odd minutes. But I just want to go down to this last little bit, which I think is very important and kind of sums it up. Particularly in construction and trades, obviously with large organisations like Site Safe, with a main focus on physical health and safety. I sort of put it like this. When it comes to physical well-being, we do everything we can to make ourselves safe. We wear restrictive PPE. We wear earmuffs to protect our hearing. We wear gloves to protect our hands, goggles to protect our eyes, steel cap boots so we don't squash our feet. I'm still kind of wondering why us guys laying flooring need to wear those. Knee pads, we make sure our power tools are safe. We get them testing bags so we don't electrocute ourselves. The list goes on and on and on. We wear a hard hat to protect our head on the outside. What do you do to protect your head on the inside? Every decision that you make about keeping yourself safe physically comes from inside your head. So why would you not take steps to look after that part of your body? Usually this is where I ask a few questions. Things like, how many of you guys have seen a counsellor? I have. How many people have seen a counsellor not because they're unwell, but because they want to stay well? I have. I sort of liken that to going for a physical check at the doctor, just to make sure that you've got nothing untoward going on. You go to the dentist to make sure your teeth are all good, not necessarily because there's something wrong with them. Why not go to a counsellor and talk to them just because you want to look after your mental well-being? You don't have to be unwell to go and see some of these people. It can actually help you to stay well. The big question that I ask, excuse me, I've got a little bit of a runny nose going on. Big question I ask guys when I'm standing in front of them, how many guys would never go and see a counsellor? or at least admit for going to seeing a counsellor because they're scared of what their colleagues or their workmates are going to think. The truth is, in New Zealand, we still have this culture of the guy that shows a little bit of vulnerability or is prepared to talk about maybe struggling with something that's going on. The fact is he's more likely to be ridiculed than he is to be helped or supported. And that is the number one reason why people are still so reluctant, men in particular, are still reluctant to reach out and get that little bit of support or that help that they might need. Just going back to that, over the course of our lives, every single one of us is going to have periods of both good and bad mental health. That is just a fact. We can't get around it. We can't get away from it. It's just the way it is. It's part of being human. Now, B's presentation alluded to the fact that last year, official stats show that 685 New Zealanders took their own lives. I and many other people, including mates in construction, believe that number to be higher. When you put it really simply, roughly 2 Kiwis every single day make that ultimate decision, which means every day there's two families, 2 lots of friends, 2 lots of workmates and colleagues that are left behind trying to figure out, trying to make sense of something that just makes no sense. Just to wrap up, it's getting on for 7 years, 6.5 years now since my brother killed himself. I approach the things that I do as probably as evident from what you just listened to, kind of a straight up the guts approach, because I think that's what men relate to. I'm more than happy to come and stand in front of a bunch of tradies and pretty much tell them how it is. I tend to swear a lot. I've kept a lid on that for this presentation, but I basically like to talk to tradies on their own level, and at the end of the day, I am just one of them. I'm just a tradie. I'm not an expert. So, getting well or staying well mentally can be just as challenging as staying well physically. And the only way that we can do it is to keep on talking about it. So, just to finish off before I hand back to Brett, he's got another meeting at 1, so I'll give him plenty of time. We just need to remember the most important piece of equipment that any of us have is this, the basic equipment that sits on our shoulders. It needs to be healthy and it needs to be functioning properly. Health and safety for the inside of our heads can be as easy as a conversation. The biggest enemy of mental well-being is silence. We need to talk about it. So that's all from me. I'll just pass back to Brett now to wrap up. So I'll just mute myself again here and stop my video.
Sorry, I'm just looking through the chat, so there's currently no questions. Look, I just want to thank Paul and B for some really good presentations. Paul's right. I mean, Paul was a recipient of our one of 3 recipients of our inaugural mental award last year at our Safeguard Awards, and he's a campaigner in this regard. And since then, around that time, we had mates in construction come into New Zealand, and there it is. There's the award. Well done, mate. And actually, it's the only awards. It's the only health and safety award ceremony I've been to where the winners got a standing ovation from the audience, and they couldn't pick between the 3, and all were very worthy. Look, as both B and Paul allude to, mental health is something we need to take seriously. We need to be talking about it. Certainly, in my time since I've come to Site Safe, I'm pushing hard on our research. We did this research into suicides in construction last year. We're sponsoring some research by Massey University on which is looking at help-seeking behaviour and safe havens for men. And we're also just kicked off a research study once again with Massey University School of Built Environment on stress and construction, which are all contributors to the broader mental wellbeing picture. but certainly picking the scab off this and opening up construction is ahead of the curve, I believe, in compared to other sectors. But there's still a hell of a lot of work to do, as Paul said, and we can only do that about reducing the stigma and getting people to open up. And as a guy said to me, who's run a similar program in England, men are just waiting for permission to speak out. And what he meant by that was that social destigmatization of being able to do that. So I just encourage you to have a think about that. I encourage you to think about in your own workplaces, how easy is it to report this sort of stuff? What processes have you got in place, and how are you treating it as a risk to your organisation? So on that note, look, thanks very much for attending, and I hope you found the seminars useful. I certainly did, and we'll see you all again at the next one. Thank you very much.